I said, Dad, Mom, I'm accepted at Yale. I'm accepted at Yale. I'm going to Yale. And my mother says, "Oh my God, get a lawyer right away. Get a lawyer right away," because what they heard was they they thought I was going to jail. I was accepted at Yale. At the time, my parents were in Iran, and they didn't know much about universities in America. Uh, uh, so when I was accepted at Yale, I was at Blair Academy in the small prep school in New Jersey, which many members of my family had attended. I was there for more than I was there for 5 years. They had a lower school. I was in the lower school, and then at high school, and I was uh, a good student and also an avid athlete. So I participated in the on the tennis team and on the squash team, but I was never one of the starters. I was a scrub on both those places because Yale had great teams. I had a great experience at Yale. I was, as you know, they mix you in with as a freshman randomly with other people, and I was in Jonathan Edwards, and the people in my entryway, we all became very good friends. And the people I was roommates with, we became very good friends. In fact, one of my roommates, Kirk Ressler, I'm still friends with. In fact, we ended up rooming together at Yale all 4 years, and we also joined Zeta Psi fraternity together. And Kirk went on to go to Harvard Law School, and I went on to go to Harvard Business School. So we were friends in Boston, and then he moved to New York as a lawyer, and I came to New York as a businessman. And then he became a foreign service person and lived abroad for many years. And it's sort of funny, we sort of lost contact for each other for 30 years. And then now it's sort of come full circle again because he's living in Palm Beach. I bought a place in Palm. He's retired in Palm Beach. I never thought I would be a Florida person, uh, but my wife fell in love with Palm Beach on a brief holiday we had there. As we ended up buying a place in Palm Beach and reconnecting with Kirk, and now Kirk and I are again good friends, and we play golf together and tennis and whatever, uh, and we see each other socially. So I think as far as being a Jewish person, uh, I never had much of a Jewish background because I was in boarding school, and Blair was a Presbyterian school. We had chapel every day, and Sunday we had a long service. So I had no Jewish education whatsoever, but felt uh, 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 ties to Judaism uh, because of my Persian background. My father was actually quite religious. So I should go backwards and say, how did we end up in America? How did I end up at Yale? Uh, my father came from a family of a large family of sort of lower middle class people living outside of Tehran. His father was a tailor, uh, and so my father had six brothers and two sisters. They all lived in a one-room house uh, outside of Iran, outside of Tehran, and they're had a very modest background. In fact, my father used to tell me he would on Saturdays they would hook up the donkey and go into town to buy food. He decided and to become an industrialist in Iran. So at first he would import refrigerators and and ranges and air conditioners and things like that, and which changed actually Iranian society drastically, especially refrigeration. People didn't have refrigerators, and he would import from America and Europe machinery and raw materials. Uh, then he expanded from there to actually making his own raw materials. He made a big aluminum manufacturing business and a big plastic manufacturing business. So our family became very important industrialists in Iran. In fact, I would say we're the leading Jewish family. From that import-export business, he came to America in like 1948 on a business trip to organize stuff. And when he came to America, he fell in love with America. He arrived in New York, and now he's a young man. Uh, uh, he came by himself. So I remember him telling me that when he arrived at the airport, he took a taxi into Manhattan, and the taxi driver stopped at every red light and followed all the rules. And he was astounded. He said, in Iran, no one would ever do such a thing, you know? And he saw how organized the country was. He said, this is a wonderful place. So he decided that he wanted to bring up his family in America. My uncle Habib, who was not the oldest, he became sort of Mr. Outside. So he was the leader of the Jewish community in Iran, and he was also the Jewish representative in the Majlis. The Majlis was a parliament, uh, sort of like a regular parliament, but the Allies sort of imposed this on Iran, um, hoping that Iran would develop into a parliamentary democracy, which it never did. Actually, interestingly enough, when the Ayatollah came to Iran in '79, the Westerners hoped, and America, Britain, etc., hoped that the Majlis would be revived and be a real political force. And the Ayatollah actually said he was going to do that. Of course, when he arrived, he decided he was going to have a theocracy, autocratic theocracy, and he wiped out all those liberal ideas completely. And he'd been sort of not almost similar to Fidel Castro. When Fidel Castro took over Cuba, everyone in America was hoping that Cuba would become a democracy, and Fidel was talking that way. The Ayatollah similarly was talking democratic stuff. He had no intention whatsoever. Actually, when the Ayatollah arrived in Tehran, my uncle Habib was in New York, uh, and I remember seeing him and talking to him at parties, and everyone was very concerned about what which way the Ayatollah was going to go. No one really knew. Uh, and so we said to him, stay in New York. Don't go back to Tehran. Wait to see how things fall out. He felt very committed to going back. He said, "Look, I'm the leader of the Jewish community. They need me there. We have all our assets and family there. I'm going back." And he went back. Uh, my father at that time was in New York also. He didn't, thank God. Uh, so they arrested Habib, and he was in prison for a while. There was a lot of effort to get him out of prison. And then one day they just took him out and had a mock trial and shot him, killed him. So that was a big shock to everyone, certainly to our family, and also to the whole Jewish community, because Habib was friends with the Shah, was a political person, was well known in Iran. It was as if in America you took someone invaded America and they took David Rockefeller out and shot him. uh, uh, unheard of. So this created a huge exodus. Then people figured if Habib was not safe, who could be safe?
Prices were rising very fast in Iran. There were a lot of protests, and so there was a movement that the Shah was claiming that the industrialists were price gouging. So as a symbolic thing, he put Habib in jail. So Habib was in jail for a while, and eventually came out of jail because the whole thing was completely ridiculous. It was the prices were rising due to inflation, had nothing to do with price gouging. And in fact, we weren't in the price gouging business. We were producing refrigerators and industrial products, aluminum products, and things like that. So anyway, so it was particularly shocking because the Shah had imprisoned Habib. So people thought that Habib would be somewhat immune from any uh, persecution from the Ayatollahs coming into power, but instead he imprisoned them, kept him in jail for a while, and then summarily took him out one day and had one of these trials. A brief, mock trial. No defense. Habib tried to defend himself. He said, "I've done nothing wrong. I've been a patriotic Iranian. I've supported and gave employment to a lot of people. Our family was very philanthropic, not only to Jews but also to everyone in general in Iran. But it didn't count. They took him out and shot him. So the reaction in the whole Jewish community and Iranians in New York also was really shocking. Uh, uh, so uh, so and I think the reason why the regime did that was in order to shock people and to send the message that Jews are vulnerable and any Jew can be executed, imprisoned. So everyone panicked and packed up and left as quickly as they could. At that time, you could leave. You had to leave everything behind, but you could leave. After a while, you couldn't leave. It was worse. People had to be smuggled out. Uh, so so Habib was sort of a martyr, I think, in Israel. People talk about Habib all the time. He's because it was like uh, like a shocking bit of anti-Semitism after the Holocaust. Probably one of the worst things that happened. I'm sure other Jews were also in prison, but he was the most prominent.
What we did was we started a small fund that was seeded by my father to create a track record. Uh, uh, and we started investing in securities, uh, New York Stock Exchange securities, through some contacts we had with some brokers, and 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 our accountant, who was my father's accountant, our office then was a small little office in my father's office. The accountant at that time, he approached us. He says, "Look, he had another client of his who was renovating brownstones on the Upper Side of Manhattan. And at that time, the Upper West Side of Manhattan was a horrible area. So it was an area where you could buy property cheaply, renovate, and create little uh, real estate uh, ventures. So, but we found out, and so partner, uh, we're financing him. He's working away. We had maybe by that time 7 buildings or so, and then we discovered that he was cheating, basically stealing from us, using money that we were providing for our properties. He was siphoning it off to do his own properties. It took us a long time to figure that out. Well, once we figured it out, it was a big, we had a big to do with him. And then we ended up splitting up the properties. So we ended up with these properties on 74th Street, which were half demolished, half occupied, in terrible condition, and some other buildings had unsafes on them. It was a mess. So what could we do? We didn't envision ourselves as rolling up our sleeves and getting in the muck there, but that's what we had to do. So we ended up uh, taking over these buildings and working it out.
Now, as to the October 7th, it's stirred in me uh, uh, closer feelings towards being Jewish, uh, and uh, and I realize now, I always felt uh, that even when you live in an environment that is very civil and like the United States, where you would feel like there's no anti-Semitism, but I think it's always under the surface anyway. And though people overtly accept you, I think you're always a little bit of an outsider, no matter what. Uh, and then October 7th, I think, brought a lot of those feelings that polite people would keep suppressed, allowed them to bring them to the surface. So uh, it's a terrible thing in all these universities. So I think we're obligated to support and help wherever we can.
I have a scholarship fund at Yale. I established it uh, uh, for kids from New York City, who uh, who ended up going to Yale, needed scholarships, and then I would get letters and stuff from these people. They were invariably minority people. I recently changed the requirement for the recipients to favor Jewish people from New York.